Imagine, just for a moment, that you run a busy, comforting neighborhood cafe.
Hmm.
You know the regulars, you know their exact orders, you are a staple of the community, you feed people day in and day out.
Right, a really safe, familiar space.
Exactly. Now imagine discovering that some of your most reliable recent customers, the ones who literally just paid you for a hot meal,
Oh, no.
might not actually be among the living.
Ugh, that is such a deeply unsettling premise.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a 1989 dossier detailing one of the most heavily debated urban legends in modern Hong Kong history.
And honestly, with the storm outside, the rain hitting the studio windows tonight, the atmosphere in here is already eerie enough. Even Chanel is spooked.
Yeah, she's definitely feeling the mood.
It's okay, sweetie. You're a good girl.
Huh?
The Princess Paw is just going to hide under the desk while we talk about this one.
She knows we're opening a dark file today. Our mission for this deep dive is to examine the specific physical evidence of this 1989 case, the deep cultural context surrounding it, and the incredibly blurry line between a tragic human accident and an unexplained anomaly.
Because the typo case is a perfect subject for this.
So,
I mean, it usually gets passed around as just a straightforward campfire ghost story, but the actual dossier is so much more complicated.
it really is.
We are looking at a documented intersection where very rigid official police protocols collided head-on with forensic impossibilities and, of course, deep-seated cultural traditions.
The environment plays a huge role in how this unfolds, so let's set the scene. The setting is December 1989 in Tai Po, which is a neighborhood in Hong Kong's New Territories.
Right.
And if you're picturing, the massive skyscrapers or the neon glow of the central business district, you really have to zoom out. Tai Po in the late 80s was known for older, low-rise housing estates. It had a much slower pace of life.
Yeah, much quieter.
And in December, the weather there is notoriously damp, gray, and carrying this quiet, biting winter chill.
Which creates a stark contrast with our primary location for this story, a restaurant called the Chu Yung Key. The dossier is specific in noting that this is a chantang.
A very specific kind of establishment.
Exactly. And for those unfamiliar with Hong Kong's culinary landscape, chantang is a traditional, fast-paced cafe. It's an absolute institution of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
They serve incredibly thick milk tea, pineapple buns fresh from the oven, and huge steaming bowls of noodle soup. It's loud, it's bright, and it's warm.
There is a universal comfort in that kind of place. If it's miserable and damp outside, sitting down in a noisy, warm cafe with a heavy bowl of beef, ho fun is exactly what you want. It's literally the less sinister environment imaginable.
Completely. It's a place associated entirely with life and nourishment. And the inciting incident of this whole case starts with something totally mundane.
Right.
On a rainy afternoon, the phone rings at Chu Yung Key. The owner, a man named Mr. Lee, has his staff take an order.
But the caller's voice is described in the reports as exceptionally low, flat, and completely devoid of any emotion.
Just a deadpan voice.
Yeah. They order a heavy meal for 4 people, specifically that beef ho fun we just mentioned, along with char siu rice. And they ask for it to be delivered to a nearby housing estate called Haysaw Gardens.
So Mr. Lee sends his delivery boy, referred to in the documents as Ming, to drop off the food.
And Ming's experience walking into Haysaw Gardens really establishes the isolation of this story. He has to navigate down a dark corridor to find the unit. And the dossier makes a point to describe this hallway as dilapidated.
Dilapidated. So we're not just talking about a building that's a bit out of fashion.
No.
Dilapidated implies active decay, right?
Exactly. Peeling paint, flickering fluorescent lights, a palpable sense of neglect. It's a very isolating baseline, even in a dense city.
Ming finds the unit and knocks. And when the door finally opens, it doesn't swing wide. It opens just a tiny sliver.
It's a crack.
Yeah. A pale hand reaches through the crack, holding a stack of cash. And the same flat voice from the phone simply instructs him to leave the food on the floor.
Now, if you're Ming, your survival instincts might be screaming at you in that dilapidated hallway, but he's just a guy doing his job.
Right, you just want to get out of there.
So he takes the cash, leaves the food, and heads back to the bustling safety of the Cha Chan Tang. But catching a potential prankster or dealing with a rude customer isn't what happens next.
No, it's so much worse.
The end of the night brings a completely different problem for Mr. Lei. When he cashes out the register, counting the daily earnings, he finds joss paper mixed in with the real Hong Kong dollars.
Oh, wow. The cultural weight of that discovery cannot be overstated. Joss paper. It's also known as hell money.
It's a ritual currency.
Yes. It's printed to look like legal tender, often with massive denominations, but it is explicitly meant for the dead. In Chinese culture, families burn joss paper at funerals or during specific festivals. The belief is that the fire transfers this currency into the afterlife, providing for deceased loved ones in the spirit world. So finding it in a business cash register is a severe taboo.
It's intimately associated with death, so finding it in your till is considered terrible luck. Mr. Lee's understandably furious. He assumes it's a sick joke. Or maybe that Ming, rushing in a dimly lit hallway, mistook neatly folded joss paper for real banknotes.
Which is a logical assumption.
He reprimands his staff and just tries to move on.
But the pattern establishes itself very quickly. 2 days later, the exact same flat voice calls in the exact same order for 4 people.
Beef au fun and char siu rice.
Yep. Ming makes the delivery to the same dilapidated hallway at Hayshaw Gardens. The door opens a sliver, the pale hand passes the money, and that evening...
Mr. Lee finds hell money in the register again.
Yes.
And this is where Mr. Lee's frustration finally overrides any superstition he might have. He assumes he's the victim of an elaborate ongoing fraud. Someone is stealing from him.
Right, he's a business owner.
So when the third identical order comes in, he decides to handle it himself. He packs the beef au fun, marches over to Hayshaw Gardens, and walks down that decaying corridor. The routine plays out. The knock, the sliver of an opening, the pale hand, the cash.
But this time, Mr. Lee inspects the money right there.
Under the flickering hallway light, he rubs the paper between his fingers. He verifies that he is holding genuine, legal Hong Kong currency.
He returns to the restaurant absolutely certain he has outsmarted the fraudsters.
But when he opens the register later that night, the very money he personally inspected has transformed back into joss paper.
That gives me full-body chills.
It's the breaking point. He does what any fed-up business owner dealing with theft would do. He calls the Royal Hong Kong Police. And that is where this local legend collides with hard forensics.
Because the police don't just write off a report of theft and fraud, especially with this strange, escalating element of joss paper. They dispatch officers to Hayshaw Gardens.
The officers arrive at the unit, knock, and get no response. Announcing themselves as police yields total silence. Following protocol for suspected foul play or a medical emergency, they break the door down.
And inside, they find 4 young men dead in the apartment.
The police immediately secure the scene and bring in the medical examiner to perform an autopsy.
The autopsy, like the official medical examination of the bodies.
Yes, the autopsy. And the medical examiner's assessment completely shatters the timeline. The medical examiner determines that these 4 men have been dead for at least a week.
Wait, a week?
Yeah.
Which presents an immediate physical impossibility.
Right.
The phone orders, the 3 separate deliveries, the physical exchange of cash through the door, all of that occurred days after the men inside the apartment had already died.
Hold on, though. A week. If they had been dead for 7 days, wouldn't someone in that building have noticed the smell before they noticed anything else?
It's a very logical question, but you have to factor in the environmental conditions. It was December, damp and remarkably cold.
Yeah.
To retain heat, the men had completely sealed the apartment.
Taped the windows.
Every window was shut tight, drafts were blocked off. That essentially turned the unit into a cold storage box, which significantly delayed the decomposition process and trapped any odors inside.
Ah.
But while the neighbors didn't report a smell, they did report something else to the police canvassing the building.
Right, the audio complaints. Multiple residents on that floor told investigators they had been hearing the distinct sounds of a late-night mahjong game coming from that specific unit. The rattling, the shuffling, the clicking of the tiles. And the neighbors were adamant that they heard this game being played continuously for days after the medical examiner proved the men were already dead.
Audio hallucinations or, misattributing sounds in an old, noisy building is one thing. But the physical evidence recovered during the autopsies presents a much harder biological wall.
Let's talk about the stomachs.
The medical examiner conducted a full internal examination. When they analyzed the stomach contents of the 4 deceased men, they found partially digested food, specifically beef au fun and char siu rice.
But digestion requires a functioning biological system. It stops the moment you die.
Precisely. The autopsy revealed that this specific food had been consumed merely 1 to 2 days prior to the police breaking down the door. It was actively digesting.
So medically, corpses that had been dead for a week were actively eating the takeout that Ming and Mr. Lee had delivered.
It defies logic.
That alone defies every law of biology. But the piece of evidence that seems to have completely broken the investigation was the fingerprints.
Oh, the fingerprints. The chain of custody here is so important. Mr. Lee hands over the stack of hell money from his cash register directly to the police.
The physical joss paper.
Yes. The police send that joss paper to the forensics lab to be dusted for latent prints, standard procedure for a fraud or theft case. The lab naturally finds prints belonging to Mr. Lee. But the other set of fingerprints pulled from that porous ritual paper were a perfect, verified match for two of the deceased men found inside the apartment.
The dead men physically handled the joss paper that ended up in the cash register.
Yeah.
So you have a situation where neighbors are reporting the sounds of the dead playing mahjong. Autopsies show the dead were digesting recent meals, and forensics prove the dead were handing out fake currency. According to the dossier, the Royal Hong Kong Police formally closed the investigation with the classification of paranormal.
Wow. It's widely cited as the only case in modern Hong Kong history where authorities officially acknowledged a supernatural explanation on the record.
It's unprecedented.
But we really need to examine the why behind that classification. Why would a strict evidence-based institution in 1989 make such a move?
Was it immense public pressure or maybe deep-rooted cultural superstition within the police ranks themselves?
It's likely a mix of cultural context and institutional paralysis. Think about the rigidity of police bureaucracy. You have forensic evidence, the stomach contents, the fingerprints, the timeline that actively contradicts itself.
Right.
You can't accuse innocent people of an elaborate hoax because the fingerprints prove the deceased were involved. But you also can't officially state that corpses ordered takeout. There is no standard bureaucratic category for an anomaly that defies physics.
So writing paranormal might not have been an admission of belief in ghosts.
Exactly. It was likely rather the only available bureaucratic off-ramp to close a deeply unsettling, unexplainable file.
That makes a lot of sense. A strict institution encountering a wall of impossibilities and simply lacking the paperwork to categorize it. But while the events surrounding the aftermath were unexplainable, the actual cause of death was determined, and it was tragically mundane.
Yes. The forensics team isolated the exact mechanism of death: carbon monoxide poisoning. The men had brought a traditional charcoal grill inside their completely sealed, poorly ventilated apartment to burn for warmth against the winter chill.
It's an incredibly common, invisible hazard.
Carbon monoxide is insidious, specifically because of how it interacts with human biology. It binds to the hemoglobin in your bloodstream hundreds of times faster than oxygen does. It essentially hijacks your red blood cells.
So you suffocate without even realizing it's happening.
Right, because the intense panic response you experience when you suffocate or hold your breath isn't actually triggered by a lack of oxygen.
What triggers it?
It's triggered by a buildup of carbon dioxide in your system. Carbon monoxide poisoning bypasses that alarm system entirely. It is odorless and silent. It simply lulls you to sleep, and your body never realizes it needs to wake up.
That seamless transition from life to death is what underpins the deeply psychological, almost folklore-like theory that the dossier presents to explain the haunting. The theory suggests that because the death was so sudden and painless, these four men simply didn't know they had died.
It's a fascinating concept, the muscle memory of the dead. Their spirits, confused and entirely unaware of their passing, simply continue their routines. They wanted to play mahjong, so the neighbors heard the tiles.
They got hungry.
Right. They got hungry, so they called their favorite local chudanteng for their usual order of beef au fun. They went through the motions of living, caught in an echoing loop until the police broke down the door and shattered the illusion.
I think this completely shifts the tone of the entire dossier. It moves from a scary urban legend meant to make you jump into a profound, heartbreaking tragedy. Four young guys just trying to stay warm on a freezing night, unaware that they had slipped away.
It really speaks to how communities use folklore as a coping mechanism. The human mind abhors a vacuum of meaning. When a community experiences a sudden senseless loss, four healthy young men gone overnight due to an invisible gas, it is incredibly difficult to process. A supernatural narrative, even an eerie one, gives agency back to the victims. The idea that they were still playing mahjong and eating their favorite food provides a structure to a loss that otherwise feels completely random and brutally unfair.
The cultural weight of the joss paper mirrors that perfectly. Joss paper is the currency of the dead, meant to provide comfort in the afterlife. The delivery of the food and the exchange of the hell money almost feels like the universe's way of transitioning these confused young men to the other side. The community's tradition literally stepping in to facilitate their passing.
We see this phenomenon globally. Sudden tragedies often spawn local legends because the bleak reality of an accidental ventilation error offers no closure. The ghost story is the shadow cast by the very real, very human grief of the community.
Which brings us to a fascinating crossroads. You have the stark reality of accidental carbon monoxide poisoning intersecting with the deep cultural traditions of the afterlife. And right in the middle, you have this baffling wall of forensic anomalies. The timeline, the digesting stomach contents, the fingerprints on the joss paper.
It proves that we constantly try to categorize the world neatly into reality and the supernatural. But this case suggests that the line between those two concepts is sometimes just a matter of what we are capable of physically proving within the confines of our current scientific understanding and our rigid bureaucratic systems.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, consider the sheer bureaucracy of a major investigative body. Forms, checkboxes, rigid protocols. We talked about how the Hong Kong police supposedly filed this case under Paranormal because they had no other way to explain the contradictory physical evidence.
Right.
It makes you wonder about the archives of other strict, evidence-based institutions around the world. How many impossible, fully documented events are quietly gathering dust in a basement somewhere? How many unsolved files exist simply because the investigating officer didn't have a standard box to check for an anomaly and decided to just stamp it inconclusive instead?
The archives of the unknown, buried under layers of institutional paperwork, are likely much larger than we would ever want to admit.
Something to ponder the next time you're enjoying a hot meal on a cold, rainy night. Thanks for joining us to explore this dossier. We'll catch you on the next one.